Hey guys, Matthew. In today's video, I was supposed to bring you guys the second portion of the Lvling guide from Act 6 to 10, but unfortunately I keep running out of characters, so I accidentally deleted the actual character. So tomorrow in my stream, I'll be doing an Act 1 to 5 run, and then after the stream, I'll record the Act 6 to 10. Now, I didn't want to come empty-handed today, so I wanted to bring you guys a piece of content. So what I decided to do is I'm going to share with you guys what I worked on today. Now, when I initially tested this build and came up with it, I realized just how strong it was, and I decided I was going to make two different versions of this build. I was going to make one which was going to be a well-rounded, solid build, which is going to be able to do basically everything game. You know, think of, for example, 100% daily map. Think of, for example, basically everything, Uber bosses, whatever. And then I was going to make another version which was going to be able to just do as much damage as humanly possible, because that's the way I like to play a lot more, where I basically just go full out on DPS. I just give up all defenses. That's not a playstyle everybody likes. Now, the reason I'm talking about that is because of the PoBs that we're going to look at later. Now, to start off this video, I'm just going to give you guys a point of reference. This build currently that I'm running, which is the equivalent of the day 2, day 3 setup, is sitting at a DPS of 10.7 million on PoB, as you can see right here. This is the exact gear that I have. So what I'll do is I'll showcase a Uber Eater of Worlds. Now, I'm not expecting this to be deathless at all. Matter of fact, I'm expecting to drop at least 3 portals, given the fact that I'm not going to do the inescapable doom mechanic. But yeah, that's what we're going to be going for. So after that, we're going to hop into the PoBs. Now, the reason why I want to showcase this on the day 2, day 3 setup is a lot of people have been asking me, hey, Matt, can this build do Ubers? And can it do it on a budget? Yes, it can. The thing is, it'll be your mechanic versus the game's mechanics, right? If you know the fights well, if you execute well, you'll be fine. However, if you make mistakes, well, you'll pay the price, and you could easily brick some fights, especially when you have to consider that you're giving up 3 portals from the get-go from the inescapable doom mechanic, at least when it comes to this boss fight specifically. So that's kind of what we're going to worry about right now. Okay, that didn't hit us. That's good. Hunger, we're going to try to get away from that. Get away from that as well. He typically doesn't do 3 in a row. That's weird. Okay, he's not in my line of sight, which is pretty unfair. But here we are. So the first inescapable doom mechanic, we're definitely not going to be dealing with that. I want nothing to do with that mechanic. It can kill me. I'm okay with it. All right. So riding mass is a good time for us to do some DPS. Gonna go ahead and flame dash behind him. He's gonna do some squid stuff. More riding mass, that's good for us. Ooh, except he actually hit us with that one. Okay, so that's unfortunate. Now, I was hoping that he would do inescapable doom, but he's probably gonna do it when I go back into the fight, I hope. Otherwise, we're just gonna have to forfeit an extra portal. So let's see what happens. I think he's not going to do it until I actually move. That's unfortunate, because he's probably going to do it right now. So, we're unfortunately, again, my mechanics versus the game's mechanics. I made a mistake. I died. So, I pay the price, which is with one of my portals. Okay. So, I didn't see the explosion, which is kind of bad, actually. I can't move. I'm not sure what just happened. I think I drowned. And I'm not sure why I couldn't move, but that is definitely unfortunate. Again, my mechanics versus the game's mechanics. If I make that mistake and I die, then so be it. So I'm gonna flame dash behind that. Hunger, we're gonna go away from that as well. Alright, looks like we're almost there. Okay, that's really annoying that he does another inescapable doom phase, because it means that we're playing with fire. Unfortunately, 2 deaths that I should not have had, but again, my mechanics versus the game mechanics, and unfortunately that time the game won. But it looks like we'll be okay, as long as we don't die from that. Alright, that was really close. And there we have it. Does that actually kill me? I was wondering if that would kill me after the fact. But that's pretty much an Uber Eater in a day 2, day 3, you know, build scenario. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but this was just a point of reference of essentially what does it look like when the PoB says that you're dealing 10.7 million DPS. All right, now let's head into the actual PoB. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 2 PoBs with the 2 different setups. So we're going to look at initially the League Starter PoBs, and these are all going to be down in the description. There's going to be, once again, 2 different setups, a mapping setup and a bossing setup. So we're going to start by looking at the mapping setup here. And as you can see, the mapping setup is sitting at a comfortable 4 million DPS. So what I just showcased was like 10 or whatever, so essentially a little bit under half of what I just did. But this is on some day 1 gear. I'm talking the cheapest of the cheap. Now, it's sitting at 50k EHP, which is pretty solid, but only 16k max hit, which is a problem that a lot of people have been bringing up to me. Matt, how am I ever going to survive when I only have, you know, 9k Fizz max hit without Molten Shell? And the reality is you probably won't, right? If you're sitting in sort of in some attacks or in some mechanics that are basically going to be hitting you for high physical damage, the reality is you're probably just not going to live through them. You're just going to die. But again, that's just what it is to play on gear which is as horrible as this. This is some really, really budget stuff. All right, but still a comfortable 4 million DPS. Now, this will absolutely destroy things like Maven, Uber Elder. The only thing that you really can't do on this sort of DPS is pretty much Ubers and 100% dealer's map. You'll be able to do 60% dealer's map extremely comfortable at this level of investment. Now, you guys had already seen this PoB, so let's talk about where do we go from here, right? So we started at that 4 million mark. So on the mid game, budget for the mapping setup, we are going to look at that real quick. So the mapping setup, yep. So the mapping setup on the mid investment is sitting at a very comfortable 7.2 million DPS. So remember that what I just showcased, which was able to kill Uber Eater, was 10 million, right? A little over 10 million. This is 7 million. Now the difference here is that our survivability is going to go through the roof, right? Because yes, on the first day, the second day, some of these items are annoying to buy, so I made the PoB to be specific to that. But as items get a little bit more, you know, in existence, if you will, these are the sort of things that you can expect to get relatively easily. I would say that for an average player, this is probably the sort of setup that you would have around, and when I say average player, I don't mean like the average who don't get to maps. I'm talking about the average people who get to, you know, actual endgame bosses. Probably the end of the first week or so should have items that are similar to that. So we got a +2 scepter, which is multi-modded. Now you could easily just go with a +1 scepter, and that would make it infinitely cheaper, and you would only lose about 10% damage. You're just going to go with the life suppress evasion shield with crafted double damage. Super cheap stuff again. And the suppression on it has been accounted for the changes that are going to happen. Crown of the Inward Eye is a surprisingly really good helmet for us. It gives us a decent bit of damage, not a ton, but also a lot of EHP. As you can see, this thing gives us like 30% of our physical max hit. So it's huge. Then we are going to go into Eldritch and Eater items. So these are not something that you'll have like day 1, but you'll have them pretty early into the league. So life, suppress, and then you'll see this physical damage taken as fire and lightning. This is essentially from Gravicious modifier, right? It's an unveil. I believe the benchcraft is like 6%. You could also go for that. It's going to be a lot cheaper that way. The gloves are just life and resistances, straight up nothing else. We would get, however, the Searing and Eater implicits for suppression, because I think we need a tiny bit of suppression to round up the suppression from the character, and also unnerved on a hit would be quite good here. The boots of choice is unironically Dark Ray Vectors. They're actually super solid boots. They give us quite a bit of move speed, decent res. The evasion per frenzy charge, we get like 6 frenzy charge, so it's a 60% increased evasion on the build. Which is not crazy because we don't really care about the evasion, but still. And then a +1 amulet with a bit of life multi. Mark of the Shaper as our endgame ring of choice. It's quite a bit of damage, and it's also just got life on it. It's got, overall, it's a pretty good ring, and you can also use it with a double influence ring of Elder and Shaper, and the cannot be stunned by spells if the other ring is Shaper will apply. However, on this level of budget, I just went with a single influence Elder ring. It's basically just life and resistance, super cheap stuff. And this would be a belt which would be crafted with Essences of Zeal, I believe, for the trap throwing speed. And I actually don't know, it should be mind throwing speed, I believe. I'm not sure why I put traps on there, but that literally does nothing for us. So let's go ahead and change that, because that's a mistake. I'm not sure why I put the trap throwing speed on there. I believe, now that I think about it, I don't think you can get mind throwing speed on a belt. Even, oh wait, no, it's trap and mind throwing speed. That's right, that's right. The essence is both. Okay, so let's just ignore anything I just said. Yeah, so trap and mind throwing speed from the essence, and then just life resistance. Super simple stuff. And then of course the flask, you can kind of just go with whatever you like. I'd go with the Quicksilver for move speed, Diamond for crit. It's pretty important. It's going to help us cap out, or close to cap out, or crit without the uses of the need, I should say, for Frost Shield. And then an Amethyst Flask because we're pretty low on Chaos Resistance. We don't really have any. And then a Granite because, of course, we're armor based. Now, looking at this, it has a EHP pool sitting at 56k, which is reasonable. 86k max hit. Now, to be fair, this is with Molten Shell. Without Molten Shell, it's sitting at 28k max hit. So this is not going to tank a Shaper Slam or anything like that, but in maps, it'll feel pretty much immortal until you add multiple, altars to your map, which makes things really, really scary. But then again, most builds are not going to survive that anyways. And then the actual setup in terms of the auras and all that stuff is all in the PoB. You really kind of just get to choose whether you want Determination or Grace. Grace is going to be probably feel better in maps. However, it's not going to save you from one-shots. Determination is actually going to save you from one-shots significantly more. So that's why we go with Determination. But this is a very well-rounded character. I would say that with the current level of damage and whatnot, with sitting at a comfortable 4.5k life, with 300 over regen, cap suppression, resistances, positive chaos res, all that good stuff, I would say that this is probably going to be able to do all Ubers. However, it's not going to do them at an incredibly fast pace, but you're also not going to be very squishy. You're going to be quite tanky, so you'll be able to take some hits. Another thing, though, is that, of course, you won't be able to tank like the massive slams or any of the massive attacks. You'll still, no matter what build you're playing, unless it's cast on that discharge, you'll probably have to know the mechanics of the fights when it comes to Uber Pinnacle bosses, because they're not that easy. Okay, that's it for the well-rounded, tanky version that still does quite reasonable damage, capable of basically everything. It'll down the Feared, it'll down Ubers, it'll do 100% deli at that level of damage, right? 7 million is more than enough for that, because I just did an Uber with 10 million, so clearly that's way more than you'll ever need. Okay, especially with the changes that they're making to the game in terms of like rares and whatnot. All right, now let's look at the actual more bossing setup. So the bossing setup is sitting at 10.5 million on the day 2/day 3 gear, which is exactly the damage that I just showcased in that boss fight, right? Pretty much the exact same amount of damage. So it's rocking the Annihilating Light. Then it's going for a Blizzard Crown, Life and Resistance. Probably the easiest way to craft this is grab some Essence of Greed and then just spam until you get like 2 decent resistance. Craft mind throwing speed and you're good to go. Skin of the Lords is our chess piece of choice. However, you could just go with basically anything. And there are multiple different color setups. You could go with Hyperthermia if you have 3 blues, 3 greens. You could go with Increased Crit Damage if you have 4 blues and 2 greens. So you could also go with Empower, which is by far the best. If you have, say, 3 blues, 2 greens, and a red. So the damage setup will depend on essentially where you are in terms of your sockets on your skin, and of course your budget, as a level 3 Empower is probably going to be worth more than a self-leveled Hyperthermia. However, a level 3 Enlighten is not exactly the most expensive thing in the world either. The mitts, or the gloves, are just Life and Resistance. Actually, it's pretty much going to be the entire character. It's Zeri Step. This is going to round out our suppression, because it's pretty hard to get the amount of suppression that we need with a staff in Skin of the Lords. So that's kind of why we want these boots. They have way more suppression than anything else in the game. I don't know if they forgot to nerf them, but they basically have 2 pairs of boots worth of suppression. Life +1 amulet, super budget stuff, and then life resistance on the rings and the belt. And then the jewels are also life and resistance. That's where you get a ton of resistance, is your jewels. Now at this point, we are ZHP, which is what I just showcased, right? Everything will kill you, but you'll also do a ton of damage, or at least what is seemingly a ton of damage, right? 10 million or so. Now let's have a look at the actual mid-budget. So again, around the end of the first week of the league, in terms of the degenerate side of things, where you want just pure DPS and only DPS. Now, this is the sort of thing that I really enjoy, but is absolutely not for everyone. It's not for the faint of heart. So, now the tree is going to change a little bit. Quite a bit, actually. The tree is going to change as you can see, we are going to go low life on this setup, which is a pretty massive change. Another thing is, let's see. So right now there's something wrong with the actual setup. I'm not sure why it's only sitting at 15 million. Oh, there we go. That's why. All right, there we go. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so on the actual bossing degenerate setup, as you can see, we went from that 10 million, which I just showcased, right, to 44 million. Actually, 44.5 million. So basically, whatever damage I just showcased, think of that times 4.5. So if that Uber Eater took me, and it was a white Uber Eater, of course, it took me like 4 or 5 portals, because of course there's mechanics that I'm just gonna have to die for, which is an escapable doom, because I'm not gonna do the mechanic and I'm not gonna kill the boss fast enough for him not to do it more like only once or twice. At this level of investment, you're basically gonna walk into the boss fight, you're gonna put your mines down, you're gonna detonate them, and you're going to do half his HP instantly. Then he's probably going to do an escapable doom. You're probably going to die, and then you're going to come back into your second portal and just blast him. Because that is 4.5 times more damage than what I already was doing, which wasn't even considered bad damage for an Uber fight. Now, the funny thing is, it's not even expensive, or I should say, not even that expensive to get to this level of damage. So we're once again going to be rocking the Annihilating Light. It's going to be a little bit more important here that we get a better roll, however. Devouring Diadem is going to be our helmet of choice, so that we get the Socketed Gems at 25% reservation efficiency, as well as Eldritch Battery. It saves us a lot of nodes on the tree, because we don't have to path up here anymore. We path down here and grab low life. Steel Lord's still the chest to go for. It's going to give us some energy shield and a bunch of damage. As you can see, 36.6% damage from this chest. Pretty insane. Gloves are just life and resistance. Now, I put in some temple gloves. So the increased damage against shield enemies, because of course we're a cold build, so we're chilling stuff. But it's not necessary. However, it's around like 5% damage or something for that modifier by itself. Boots are just going to be life, resistance, that's it. And then action speed from, I believe it's Searing Exarch. Amulet's going to be a +2 multi-modded, so +1 spell, +1 cold, and then multi-modded with life and mind throwing speed. Now, it's actually going to be super easy to make these amulets because of the upcoming mirroring mechanic from the Lake of Kalandra. You're essentially just going to need a +1 cold with like some amount of life, and then basically crafted trap throwing speed, and then you're going to throw that in there, and you're going to hope that you get the +2, the doubled mind throwing speed, and the doubled life. It's going to probably take a few attempts, but the cool thing is you can basically just throw amulets in the Harvest Reforged Cold until you get +1 cold and a bit of life, and then just craft the throwing speed and you're good to go. So it should be relatively easy to make something similar to that. Mark of the Shaper, still our go-to. As you can see, 18.6% damage derived from this item. It's pretty insane. Then just a regular, of course, an Elder Stone, or 2 Stone Rings, so just resistances across the board. And then another one of the big item is going to be Coward's Legacy. Now, Coward's Legacy allows us to count as low life when we're cursed with vulnerability. It also gives us vulnerability as 80% effect, and also gives us 50% effective curses on you. Essentially, when you equip this thing, the translation in English means you're going to die to everything. The good thing about it is it doesn't really matter, because everything is going to die to you way faster. Because you already don't have defenses, right? So now you have less than no defenses, which is basically no defenses. So it's perfectly fine, and you are going to get a substantial amount of damage from equipping this belt, as it allows you to go Pain Attunement, which is a, chill 30% more damage on your build for one single investment point. Now, we can go way past that on this build if we wanted to go with a Mage Blood. However, I know that that's not something that most people are ever going to really get to. So I decided to basically make the build without it. So we've got a Quicksilver Flask. Of course, move speed is super important even in boss fights. And then a Diamond Flask of crit. This is where we get a lot of our crit. As you can see, we're at 88% without the flask, but that's not entirely true, because if we're sitting in our Frost Shield, we are going to be capped crit without the flask. And then you've got 2 open slots in your flask to kind of just do whatever you want. Probably just go with like an Amethyst, especially if you're going to be running things like the Feared. That Chaos Res is actually going to save you more than you could ever really imagine. Realistically, for the flask, it's kind of up to you. You could even go with more damage if you wanted with a Bottle of Faith, stuff like that. It's up to you, entirely up to you. Now, what makes this actually possible? Because we are fitting in quite a few auras right now. You'll see that we have essentially our Righteous Fire, Flame Dash, or Cast 1 damage taken Immortal Call, which doesn't sound like it'll do much, right, with this level of physical damage reduction, but it's actually pretty insane how many times this thing saves me. So we're going to have our debuffs, of course, and then our free aura, which is going to be Zealotry, and then our Arrogance, Vitality, Frost Shield. But the thing is, on our helmet, we're able to use a Purity of Elements, a Skitterbots, and Hatred. Now, Hatred allows us to use a Watcher's Eye, which the other versions of this build do not use, because they don't really use any auras that really require a Watcher's. Now, on the tanky setup, you could easily throw in a Watcher's Eye for Determination, and then use like physical damage reduction, determination, stuff like that. It's actually quite strong if you want to be even tankier, but I just didn't throw it in there. But this one is just basically basic Hatred. We also have the Chaos Resistance by Purity of Elements. Now, this specific Watcher's Eye would probably be quite expensive, but if you just remove the Chaos Resistance Purity of Elements, it actually is not going to be any more than a couple X or a few X, whatever that translates to in Divines in the upcoming league. But yeah, what's going to allow us to do that is essentially we're going to go with a small cluster with 2 passives, Mana Reservation and Spiteful Presence for Hatred, Mana Reservation efficiency. Or I believe you could also just go with Hatred on the helmet and then instead go for a Purity of Elements cluster, but I'm not sure if those actually exist. But that's essentially where we're going to be at. Now, this is probably the version that I will play. I will league start with the actual well-rounded character, because in maps you definitely want to be able to progress. You want to have a smooth experience. You don't want to be dying all the time. Then, once I get to actual endgame, I'm going to farm currency using probably the mid-budget of the mapping setup, which is the one that had 7 million DPS, because it's very, very cheap, few X. And then I'm going to farm currency with that to get myself to be able to make the complete degenerate DPS of 44 million. And then I'm probably just going to annihilate everything in the game and just basically get mad when I die and laugh when I kill everything. And that's going to be it until I decide to play another build. Anyways, I wanted to share with you guys the different PoBs, the different level of investments, and of course, a little bit of a showcase of what an Uber boss might look like on a super small budget version of this build. Hopefully it was insightful. Again, tomorrow for the second portion of the leveling guide. Before I go, I want to say a massive thank you to my supporters: Alex, the other Alex, the third Alex, Skady, Bearded Abe, Brandon, Gustavo, Domo Singh, Desu, Miss, Joe, Loopold, Mercury, Nake, Patrick, Rascold, Bert, Rocky, Solmonk, Exo, the Great Master, Thomas Mass, as well as Maestro, Naelids, Caesar, Bitizen, Nectarion, Noi, Zethrion, as well as Larsus. Hopefully you guys enjoy, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.